the projects are so huge when you do urban design and master planning that even the governments cannot finance it by themselves because the funds required are in billions of dollars. So it usually ends up becoming a partnership between private developers and the government. So government definitely has to create infrastructure, has to master plan the property, master plan the whole area, create plots, and then the plots will be bought by developers, private developers, who would develop them within the framework of what the government has decided as the master plan. So if government has decided on this plot, there will be a 23-story apartment building, that's what that plot will be built for. It can't be built for anything else. You can't build a 15-story building, it has to be 23, because we now use what we call form-based zoning. And when we do form-based zoning, we actually create structure or the massing of the buildings. And the massing of the building is important to create the character of the city, and it's tied to that. So if you change the massing of the building, the character of the city changes, which changes the vision that was created originally. So everything is predetermined. But there are private developers who should be given opportunity to make money. So a developer will only come if he can see that I can make money on this property for developing, and they will participate with you. So what governments have to do is they have to make partnership with these developers. And government will do the infrastructure, private developers will develop the buildings. But a lot of times what happens is governments do not leave enough money on the table for private developers to make. So if government sells them land so expensive, and the developer looks at that and he goes, if I develop it, I won't make any money. So he won't come. So then government has to say, okay, well, we have to reduce the price of the land. Then there's also cash flow. Like governments could say, I want 100% of the money for the land up front. And the developers say, that's too much money up front, I'm not going to develop it. I'd rather go somewhere else. Versus if the government says, hey, pay us 10% of the money, start your project. As your project develops and you're selling it, give us portion of that money. And so we both benefit from your cash flow of the people who end users who are going to. So that's the kind of structures. You got to come up with these financial models that works. And then there's also incentives, incentive-based policies. The governments have to make incentive-based policies. Like anybody who builds here will not be charged tax for next 10 years. So that's an incentive for somebody to build, and they make profit and they'll pay tax on it. Or we will give you a payment plan, or we will reduce the cost of land if you do a sustainable building. That's an incentive. Or we would let you build a building without any parking because it's right next to a metro station. So you'll save money, and that's an incentive, you know? So incentives can be formed in a policy by the government, which then brings the developers in from all over the world. One more incentive could be if I, as a developer, bring in millions of dollars from a third country into your country to develop, I should have a right to repatriate that money in the same currency as well as the profit that I make out of it. And you won't charge me any taxes. So there's all these policy incentives. And this is what a perfect example really is Dubai. That's what Dubai did. They actually master planned communities. They didn't even create infrastructure. They started selling the paper lots. On the paper, they said, this is your plot. Where's the road? This is where the road's going to be built. And people started making incremental payments, very important. And as they made incremental payments, they started building their building. They started selling their apartments. People would pay them the money. They would take part of that money, give it to the landlord or the government. And the government will use that money to create infrastructure. And it's a win-win situation for everybody. So yes, government and public-private partnership is very important in master planning urban design.